Hello and welcome to FYI. I'm Elaine Chang-Baxter, the Director of Partnerships for Montgomery County Public Schools. With us here virtually is Mr. Julius Maina. He is the Partnership Coordinator for the 2020 Decennial Census. Tell us about the Decennial Census and why it's important for Montgomery County families.
Absolutely. So thank you for being on the show. It's truly a pleasure. We've done a lot of great work in the county. But no, the 2020 census is upon us. It's the decennial census, and all that means is it's done every 10 years. But it's a constitutionally mandated population count of the people and the residents in the United States. So what the purpose actually, in 1790, if you can think that far back, the framers of the Constitution said, we have to figure out how to count people for the purposes of allocating funding to different states. So it's essentially a population count that really helps the federal government give money to states for the services, schools, roads, and the various things that states might need to be vibrant and thrive and grow.
So clearly it's really important for people to respond since it only happens every 10 years and funding is based on that. What are some of the changes that have occurred between 2010 and now 2020?
Yeah, no, I love that question because I always say we started off with horse and buggies in 1790. That's how we did the count. But for the first time ever, believe it or not, we've gone online. So beginning March 12th, in this decennial census, you're able to complete it in 3 different ways. You can go online, call over the phone, and you can still get the paper form. So in 2010, I was an old man back then, we had the traditional paper form, and people were used to people coming to your door and knocking and say, hey, can you please respond? We found out that to just adapt to technology like we are doing exactly right now, it was important that we went online. And one of the things that going online allowed us to do, we're now able to provide the online form in 13 languages, indexed to 52. So that's the main changes. We've gone online, it's available in language, it's accessible, but the paper form is still available if you're old school like myself.
Okay, so the paper forms have already come to the households?
Yes, ma'am. So the online started March 12th. The paper forms began May 1st, which was our original timeline. And then we were going to start enumerating at the end of May. But as you know, enumeration, door knocking has changed. So we have shifted our timeline. But as of right now, you should be receiving a paper form only if you do not respond online or call over the phone.
Okay, so just to clarify, people that have the paper form could mail it back, or they could make a phone call, or they can go online to respond. And the
Absolutely.
paper form, if they have it in front of them, will tell them what to do.
Yep.
Okay, great. What are some strategies that the US Census Bureau has employed to get everybody counted in 2020?
Yeah, so in 2020, we looked at the data in 2010 and what people said why they did not respond. The number one thing is distrust for government. I know it's shocking. How can anybody not trust the government? And the second one was just misinformation. So we launched our Trusted Voices campaign where we partnered up with the local voices. We realized in order to make this decennial successful, we had to talk to the faith-based institutions, the schools, MCPS, any service-based organization, because if they believe what we're saying, that it's important to get counted, the information coming from them goes a lot longer than coming from a government official. So the Trusted Voices campaign, Montgomery County actually launched a complete count committee, and all that is they have these task forces where they look at different segments that also have outreach potential. So we partnered up with them. So they have business, faith-based, media, and they're targeted in the community, right? So they look like the community. It's a task force made up of the pastor, the superintendent of schools, and we found out that if that's the trusted voice delivering the message, we will actually get more people to respond. So that's what we've done differently, and it's been very successful.
That is wonderful, really, because people do trust the guidance of leaders. So for families that may hesitate to complete the survey, why should they feel safe?
Yeah, so it's constitutionally mandated, but there's also constitutional promise. So Title 13 of the US Constitution states that we must uphold privacy and confidentiality for any responses received from the nation's population. We will not share information from FBI, IRS, or CIA, and a lot of people don't know that, right? So in this time where information and technology is out there, people are also scared. So one of the things we tell people, not only is our form online safe and secure, we've done a lot of things to make sure that people are aware what spamming is, right? You will not see our form on a .com, it'll be .gov. We've dedicated a secure line where if you're concerned about your form, concerned about who sent it to you, we have a line where you can call and say, hey, I believe you that it's safe, confidential, secure, but I'm not sure if this is a census form. You say, you know what, call us, right? You now have a bigger window to fill it out. So work with us to make sure that you feel as comfortable as possible to fill it out, because that is the main hesitation for a lot of people. Is it safe? Is it secure? And can I trust that this information will be kept confidential?
And I understand that the number of years that the data is actually secure is quite high. Can you just share that data?
Yeah, so that the census form is kept confidential for 72 years. And so for most of us, we will not see our data in a lifetime. But what's exciting, you can actually now go online and you can see census data for 72 years ago. So if you want to find out your family history and what it looked like 72 years ago, it's something that's made available for exactly that purpose. And I also do want to add that the reason why it's 72 years, all census employees take a lifetime oath, right, to uphold the confidentiality and security of the respondents and everybody that does that form. So like myself, I was sworn in, and I cannot share any information that I find while conducting anything related to my job. And the penalty, 5 years in jail and $250,000 is what I will be held liable in the event I breach that trust.
Interesting. Why is it really, really, really important for students, parents, community members to make sure that their households are included in the census in the state of Maryland and otherwise? What can we emphasize here for those that are watching the show?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I always say as a former educator, you have to make it plain, right? So we talk about things like free lunch or English as a second language classes. And what we don't often connect it to is, in order for these services to be provided, we have to determine who needs it, right? So part of the form is we look at not only age, sex, and location, but language spoken in the household, because that's how we provide services. So when the money goes down to states, and they're writing up grants and they're trying to determine who needs what services, it's going to be based on census data. So the more people that fill it out, the more people get the services. So that's one. And then number two, for school districts like Montgomery County, which are majority minority, it's important to reflect the services needed by those populations, right? Whether it's language, whether it's 33.3% of Montgomery County school have school and free and reduced school lunches. But if we want to expand programs like that, we have to determine who needs it and how to expand it and what communities to expand it to. Roads, technology, right? We say, you know, this school needs this technology. A lot of that is directly from census data. We have the Statistics in Schools initiative that we launched. We found that it's important for students specifically to learn about why the census matters at an early age. So we've tailored curriculum. So if you're a parent and you want to just expand classroom education, we have that for you. But if you believe in indirect learning, right? I was that kind of child where I wanted to just play with data, look at it. Online, you can have that as early as K through 12, or kindergarten. Resources that will start children thinking about, you know what, the census matters to me and this is why. Have my parents filled it out? They should. And if not, I'm going to make sure that they do, because children are actually the biggest advocates for most things. So.
Great. And so those resources are found on the Census Bureau's website? Yes,
ma'am. So if you, if you just go to simple search statistics in schools, it'll take you to a page and we'll be the first link.
Great. How many questions are on this survey? Is it a time-consuming survey to fill out? And specifically, is the citizenship status a question on the survey?
So great question. So I'll start with the citizenship question will not be included on the form, right? And I don't want to go into the legislative history, but the bottom line is a decision was made that we will not include that because we knew that it would impact response rates in specific communities. That being said, there's only 9 questions on this census form, and they're pretty simple questions. So you just think age, sex, how many people in the household, your address, and we will not ask for a social security number, bank account number, And if anybody does that, it's not the Decennial Census. The other important distinction, we do have another survey called the Area Community Survey. It's about 75 questions and it's longer. So if you get that at around the same time, which you might, it is not the Decennial Census. So anything over 9 questions is not the Decennial Census. And this one will only take you maximum 10 minutes. I am a self-proclaimed bachelor, so it took me less than 4 minutes. I didn't have too many people to put on my form. But depending on your household, it should only take you 10 minutes.
Okay, great. So we can't emphasize enough with the community that it's really important that everybody get the census in so that your household numbers can be counted so that we can get funding for any of the services, public services, whether it's the schools or law enforcement, fire rescue, whatever services get funded through this count. It's really important for our community to respond and get those numbers counted so that we can get what we rightfully deserve as a community. When answering the census questions, who should be counted in that household?
So that's a great question. So I always say it's a head count of residents, right? We have this traditional understanding of head of household, and it doesn't apply directly to this form, right? So what we found, just the nature of how we're constructing families, one household could have 3 different families, meaning more than one head of household. In 2010, you got one form and you were responsible for including everybody in your household. So anybody living in your house at the time of the count, which is April 1st, whether it's an aunt who's been there for a long time or a student that you care for, you do not need a direct familial relationship. It's just who's in your house at that time. But because we went online, any head of household can now just go online and put in that address and say, hey, this is my family and I know their age, their sex, and their data, and we encourage them to do that. And the best part is if more than one family that lives in one household responds, we'll compile that data and say, this is all coming from one house. So anybody living in your house, April 1st, or majority of the year should be included in the census count. And that's as early as 1 year old because children under 5 were the highest historically undercounted population. So we want to emphasize, make sure you count your kids and anybody else who's living with you.
So anybody, including a baby, are in the count. Just any living being in your household that's a human is in
Absolutely.
the count.
So pets don't count. However, if your child was born prior to April 1st, include them. If they were born after, they will not be included in this decennial. And
I see.
A lot of people, when you age, they'll be 0 as their age if they're born before April 1st.
Are there communities that are typically undercounted during the decennial census? And if so, what populations are they? And maybe what are some strategies to outreach to them?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I stated, children under 5 is the highest undercounted population across the board, regardless of citizenship, race, class. For some reason, and we've been really trying to figure this out, children under 5 are the most historically undercounted. Addition to that, any mobile population, and that just looks like college students, right? They tend to move around a lot. They're still dealing with the quintessential crisis of what I'm going to be and where I'm going to live. My parents' house, on the couch, or a dorm room. And a lot of off-campus residents don't realize that their parents are not counting them on the form. They should, fill it out where they are. Immigrant, low English proficiency populations traditionally have not always felt invited to respond, and that's why we've expanded our language services. Veterans, elderly population, it truly scans the spectrum, because what we found, if people don't know that it matters to them, they will not respond. So the easier answer is anybody who never heard this MCPS TV recording probably has not considered the importance of responding. So.
Where can someone find more information about the hard to count or historically undercounted communities? And again, what data might you be using to outreach those communities?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say go to 2020census.gov, and that will provide you with all the facts you need to know about why the census is important. But if you want the data, census.gov/ROAM, and that's Rome, right? So Rome on Rome. And what you can do, you can put in your zip code, you can even put in your school district, and you can see in 2010 how people responded in your community and the predicted low response score, right? Believe it or not, we have an idea of what communities we need to specifically target to make sure that they're counted, because an undercount results in lost money. So some of the strategies we've employed, we looked at those low response score areas, and we found partners that serve those areas and say, hey, your community could really benefit from responding to the census, and this is why, and help us with getting the outreach out. So that's what we've done. So, but we encourage people to go online. And actually right now, if you go to 20census.gov, hit get the facts, self-response rates, you can literally see how your community is responding right now in real time. Meaning, if you want to know, hey, how much more work do we have left to do? Well, the goal is 100%, right? We all still have work to do. It's still important to go out there. And if you filled it out, find somebody who has not and convince them to fill it out.
So that's a good tip. So anybody living in the state of Maryland, and especially Montgomery County, Maryland, which is where we're filming, actual citizens, faith-based groups, community members can help outreach to make sure that their neighbors are all getting themselves counted so that we can get the rightful funding that we deserve.
Absolutely, and I actually want to do a plug. The complete count committees do not have to be formed by government. There's this misnomer that in order to be part of a complete count committee, I have to be elected. And the reality is anybody in any community who has a sphere of influence, reach out to us. And we have partnership specialists like myself who will help you understand the importance, go through the training, and so you can be an advocate in your community, because the goal is we can set up as many complete count committees as possible, because at the end of the day, the goal is to make sure that everybody gets counted. So if you believe your community is specific targeted outreach, work with us and we can help you set that up. And I also just want to point out that this work and this effort is only as good as a partner. So in Montgomery County, big shout out to Diane Vu and Sean Ellis. They are running the Montgomery County Complete Count Committee, and they've broken it up into the 4 different jurisdictions in Montgomery County, and it's doing a phenomenal job. So thank you to our partners. And then we look forward to working with them as this continues.
Well, Mr. Maina, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was certainly informative, and we hope to help get the messaging out to get everybody counted here in Montgomery County, Maryland.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. I'm Elaine Chang-Baxter. Join us next time on FYI.